few more minutes before we get started. We have a pretty good topic tonight. We think it's very practical, something you can apply right away, something you can study up on after we've finished. There's lots of information online. So, and we think it will be helpful if you can implement our topic tonight.
All right, it's about 5 minutes after. We want to welcome you to Marriage Mondays, of course, with Nick and Trina Brinson under the pastoral leadership of Dr. Finance Bush and Lady Denise Bush. We're basically here to encourage your marriages and encourage couples and singles who are actually thinking about.
Oh, it's me. All right. So, one thing we do want to bring to your attention is Bishop Bush, our pastor, will begin on Sundays teaching on his relationship series, and you do not want to miss that. Every time, every couple of years or so, he teaches on this topic of relationships, and it is always such a powerful revelation to help you grow your relationship and to understand family and marriage. And he said he'd start with the single relationships first. So all of that is important for us to have knowledge of what we can do in our singleness so that we are fulfilled and whole. And then if you choose to move into marriage, how do you go about making that relationship strong while maintaining your personhood, managing yourself. His lessons are just, I never get bored of them, and it's never the same thing all the time. These are lessons that you definitely want to be a part of. So make sure that you have our in on our system for when he's teaching those lessons so that you can have an opportunity to join in and share that with you. It can be very healing for your relationship. So we encourage you to make a point to be present on Sunday at 10 a.m. And I'm not sure if we're going to do Wednesday. You'll get an alert, of course, for Wednesday night services at 7. I would at least tune in to see if that's the topic he's covering, because his relationship series is life changing.
All right, and I just want to take this opportunity to wish Pastor Bush and Lady Denise a happy 39th anniversary on
Yes.
Friday.
Yeah.
So if you feel led, bless them in their relationship, because you definitely will be given to fertile ground if
Right.
you do that. So just want to wish them a happy anniversary and helping us, encouraging our marriage, and helping us through this process of being marriage directors.
Absolutely.
With that said, that leads us to our topic tonight about love. In their relationship, talking about marriage, and the bishop and the first lady, they had a lot of up and downs. If you've talked intimately with them, they've shared that information with you, so you know that you can get through. So, and it all comes out to love, and love never fails. So our topic tonight is basically coming from 1 Corinthians 13, 4 through 8. And I'm going to read that. Just take the time to read it. It says, love suffers long and is kind. Love does not envy. Love does not parade itself, and it is and not puffed up. Does not behave rudely. Does not seek its own. Is not provoked. Evil. Does not rejoice in iniquity. Rejoice in truth. Bears all things. Believes all things. Hope for all things. Endures all things. And most of all, love never fails. So, with that said, we're going to talk about how do you and your wife or your significant others feel loved. That's a topic that most people try to discuss or try to understand. But how do you know that your significant other is being loved? When me and my wife went through this training of how I thought she felt love, it was most of giving gifts, showing her that I love her by giving her a trinket of what I thought was something that she could cherish, and it showed that I loved her. But when we did this thing called the Five Love Languages, which is a series produced and researched by Dr. Gary Chapman, the Five Love Languages is what most people, how they express their love towards one another. And if you're not expressing that person's love language, sometimes that person doesn't feel love. So we're going to talk about each individual love language tonight. There's 5 of them, and we're going to discuss how your partner may feel loved or not.
Yeah. And this, there's a quiz online. Like I said, this is one of the, if not the best-selling relationship book ever. It's got to be in the top 3. So it's a very popular book, but the information in it is based upon scripture. And I just encourage you to get a copy of the book, or to they have them at Goodwill. We buy books, used books from Goodwill sometimes, and they always have this book in Goodwill just because it's so popular. So I encourage you to look online, pull up the information online, so that you can take the quiz. There's a quiz in the book, and you can do the quiz online in just a few minutes, and you just answer the questions based on how you feel love, what you prefer, how you prefer for someone to express gifts to you, love to you, and at the end it will tell you what your top 2 love languages are, and that will help you in knowing what your spouse can do to make you feel loved. And having your spouse to do the test as well will show you what means more to your spouse as far as feeling loved. Because loving somebody and expressing it and them feeling loved is 2 totally different concepts. And if a person doesn't feel loved, it is just not as valuable for you to love them. If you love them and they don't feel that love, you're going to have some problems there. So this is something just to help strengthen your efforts towards one another. So the first love language we want to cover is called words of affirmation. And words of affirmation communicates with words how much you love your partner. And those words can be spoken or written, but that's that particular love language. And how you can communicate through words of affirmation is by verbally saying I love you. That for some people is extremely important. And if you have a spouse who vocalizes that often, they probably expect to hear that back from you. And I remember one lady we were talking to years ago, was trying to help them and counsel them. It was so important to her that she didn't like to be told love you. She felt like that was a brush off. She wanted to hear that her spouse say I love you. She wanted it to feel that what he was saying was sincere, and that he was taking the time to say it. And that was really a big deal for her. And it may sound petty to somebody else, but if it's important to her, then the one person in the world for whom that bit of information is important would be her spouse. He needs to know that she needs a true expression, verbal commitment of I love you. Just as often as she gives to him, he needs to make sure he's keeping up with her, or vice versa. It can go both ways. It's not gender related to gender at all. Making compliments to your spouse is a way of giving them love through words of affirmation. Those verbal compliments. Writing them a letter or poetry or something that you can verbally share with them, giving words that are positive, encouraging, and expressing love. So that's the importance that's several ways that you can express love to a person whose love language is words of affirmation. And we want to give you the reversal. And the reversal, what I mean by the reversal is, what happens if that person does not receive those words of affirmation that they need in order to feel loved? Well, the reversal is people whose primary love language is words of affirmation. If you say something negative or hurtful to them, that cuts a lot deeper than for somebody whose love language is not words of affirmation. So be careful. Words are powerful to a person whose love language is words of affirmation. So you have to be careful that what you're saying is of what you say to that person. words that may not hurt. You know, you may blow off and say, I hate you, or you getting on my nerves, or whatever. For some people, that may not be a big deal, but for a person whose love language is words of affirmation, you've cut a lot deeper than you thought you had, because of how such high esteem that person holds words is very powerful, and it's such high esteem. So you have to be mindful to use your words to affirm and to show love, and not to tear that person down. Same thing with the compliments. Compliments build up. Criticisms and would tear that person down a lot more than it would a person whose love language is not words of affirmation. The second love language is quality time. And people who have quality time as their main love language, they'll value spending time with their partners and getting their full attention. It's not going to the movies together. That's not quality time. It may, while you're sitting in the movie, because when you're sitting in the movie, you don't have each other's full attention. You're both looking at the screen. Yes, it's nice to share a movie together and talk about it afterwards. The talking about it afterwards might be quality time if you have each other's full attention. If you scrolling through the phone, you know, and one person is talking, that's going to be the reversal. When you are not giving that person your full attention, that can be very offensive to a person whose love language is quality time. Another example would be eating together and having personal conversations, doing new experiences together. That's why we do date nights regularly. That's very important to me. That's actually when we tested, we both tested with one of our high. I had two, but we both had quality time listed as one of our top two love languages. So that's the reason that having those date nights every week is so important to us, because without them, that's a lack of expression of love. So I hope this is making sense. I'm not seeing many comments, so I'm hoping hoping this is helpful to people. Or if you have questions, please type in your questions as well. So we talked about the reversal. You hurt people whose love language is quality time when you avoid spending time together. When you postpone dates, or you're distracted when they're talking to you, that would be very hurtful to a person whose primary love language is quality time. That would do some damage in your marriage. So you have to make a point to be intentional about spending quality time together. You got anything to say on that one?
No.
Okay. That's yours, isn't it?
All right. Love language number 3 is receiving gifts. If your love language is gifts, you appreciate gifts and concrete symbols of love. Buying somebody something, that if their love language is gifts, that's a big deal. Don't ever underestimate a little trinket of appreciation to a person whose gifts is whose love language is gifts. Indeed, the value of a gift is actually often less important unless he or she's are not a quality person, and that means if they say they want something and then you get it from them, then they back out of it. You know, that's that person not being fair to you, and as expressing the way that they show love. But those people that are faithful and know what their love language is, that gift is a real big deal. Now, the reversal. If you never buy gifts for your partners of love languages gifts, you will hurt them. And that's not what you want in your relationship. You don't want hurt. You want a person that's going to feel appreciated by the way that you show them their love language. All right, that's all I have to say about that. You got something?
I was just thinking, you were saying earlier about how you used to buy me gifts, and he used to buy really good gifts that were thoughtful and personal, and I appreciated them. But that wasn't my love language. That's not a big deal for me. I mean, it's nice to get a nice gift, and some things were like really thoughtful, and so that's a cue for me to take that maybe because he thought that that's how I felt loved, that may be something that he would prefer. those gifts. But it just didn't make a big deal to it. Wasn't I think for the amount of effort he was putting into the gifts, it didn't match what I was looking for as far as feeling loved. I was much more interested in spending quality time together, and then the next love language, which is acts of service, and that's my number one, all day, every day. And what this means is that people whose love language is acts of service, it means they appreciate your help as a concrete sign of love. The key word to understanding acts of service is let me do that for you. That's the key for someone whose love language is acts of service. They want you to help them do whatever it is. It can even be something small. It can be cooking, preparing the table, changing children's diapers, washing a kid. As I would say, I used to say that all the time. Just wash a kid. That's all I needed to do. Bathe them, get them ready for bed. Anything to help out with those routine, everyday tasks. The other day, I went to the grocery store after work, and I was tired. And so I called him and asked him to come to Walmart to finish up the shopping for me. And I know he knows how badly I wanted him to do that for him. So, and I appreciate the fact that he dropped whatever he was doing, came, finished it up, completed everything that needed to be done, came home, and he and the girls put the dishes, groceries, everything away, and I didn't have to do anything. That meant a lot to me. So that's important to me. I always feel like I have a lot to do, and to have somebody to care enough to see how hard I'm working to do what I got to do and to actually help me with it. Yes, that's very important to me. But that is a love language. Because if you see me struggling with something, and I say that sometimes, don't you see me struggling? Help me out. True. So that's definitely a love. That's a thing. It's a love language. You may have never thought of that, but it's very important. And to not help, it does the opposite. It sends a message of I don't care about you, or I don't appreciate you. So it may not make sense to you if that's not your love language. One thing to remember with acts of service is people have different areas that they may want help in. And so it's important for you to understand and communicate with your spouse to find out what kind of help is it that you like to have. What kind of help do you prefer? Because there are some things that I'm particular about. I don't like anybody, bothering certain things, my office stuff or whatever. There's some things I do not want your help. Please don't clean my office. Don't bother this. So you find out what's important to that person so that your efforts are useful and that you're accurately communicating to that person in the areas that they would like to have your help in. I'll make a point too. Refuse the reversal for acts of service. One of the things that does the most damage, not only refusing to help, that does a lot of damage, refusing to help, but also broken promises. Broken promises are particularly painful for those who speak acts of service as their love language. So I don't know if some of you are starting to kind of see where you might fall into, where some of these love languages might mean more or less to you or to your spouse. We've got one more we're going to cover, and then we'll wrap it up.
All right, the last one is physical touch. Partners whose main love language is physical touch will feel you love them, hug them, cuddle, have sex, and hold each other after sex. Even here, there's a different dialect when we express through situational physical touch, which parts of the body one likes the most. That's a very interesting topic of physical touch. Some people do not like to be touched, but there are some people, if you do not touch them, that sends a signal that I don't love you, or I don't like you. You're not worth touching right now. So So when you're touching another person, don't assume, but ask, or better yet, observe how they like to be touched when you're touching them. If you get into a situation where a person doesn't like to be touched, but you are a touchy person, that other person has the responsibility to make sure your love language basket is full. You may not like to be touched, but if your partner likes to be touched, it's your responsibility to fill that basket. Because some of y'all kind of understand what this means. Because if you don't, somebody else might. And you don't want that to invade your marriage, and that's a whole new topic we could talk about later. But it's your responsibility to fulfill your partner's love language.
Right.
The reversal, and I just hit on it a little bit. Lack of touch, of course, is particularly painful for a person whose main love language is physical touch. You must be a guy who's not. You must be a.
Might.
Huh? What you mean?
You might be a guy who's not into holding hands.
But if that's your partner's love language, you have to do that sometimes. You have to learn how to touch your partner where they enjoy the touch, not the way you want them, not the way you want to touch them, but how they enjoy the touch.
And the reversal of that also is if you've hit that person slapping or some type of physical abuse, that can last a long time in the mind of that person. Not that abuse is ever okay, but for someone whose love language is physical touch, even if you're touching them in play and as you touch them in a way that they don't prefer to be touched, that could be more damaging than it would be for somebody whose love language is not physical touch. So the bottom line is you really have to get to know your spouse, get to know their love language, and learn to communicate what your love language is as well. If this information is new to you and you don't have a clue what your love language is or what your partner's love language is, go online, take the quiz, and have some conversation around it. Be honest. Be honest, because you want to be fulfilled as well as you want to fulfill your partner's need. So be honest in answering the questions. If your husband, some guys will hit women like across their butt or across their hips. Okay, if your husband does that and you've never said anything to him about it, and you really don't like it, okay, well now's the time for y'all to have that conversation and for you to say, I know it's what you like to do, but I'm just would really prefer if you didn't do that. Be honest with each other because you want your relationship to be fulfilling to you as well as you want to fulfill your partner's needs. So it's a good conversation for you to have. This book, this research is good for you to sit down and just have some conversation about it in order to strengthen your relationship.
The quiz is actually found on the number 5 lovelanguage.com. And it takes about 3 minutes to do the quiz, and you can find out in 3 minutes what your main love language is. And like my wife said, start having some conversation about what express love to you.
Yeah. All right. So we do want to remind you that Pastor Bush will be teaching on relationships. So we're very excited about that. And Bishop Bush, I saw you joined in, so we wanted to make sure that you got our anniversary wishes to you and to Lady Denise Bush. We appreciate how you have opened up your relationship to pour into us specifically, as well as hundreds of couples throughout the years. So we really appreciate that, and we hope that you all have a wonderful anniversary and that lots of people will sing you something on Cash App.
Bless the bishop and the first lady.
So I think that's all we have for tonight. Anything else?
No, that's it. Just tune in on Sundays for Bishop's series on relationships. And he pointed out in church on Sunday that he was going to talk about relation, how you relate to one another, and basically building your marriage and your relationship off of the word relation, because that was very important to him and Lady Bush having success in their marriage.
Yeah, it takes skills. It doesn't come easily, and I don't know. Maybe it comes naturally for some people. It didn't come naturally for us. We've had to really work at it and constantly have to work at it. But it's worth it. It's worth it to put the energy and the effort into it. And to have support is important. To be surrounded by, to have a couple that can mentor you, and to have information readily available to you to help support your growth. It has to be a constant effort to grow in your relationship, because if you don't put effort into it, it will die. It will not be what you want it to be. You have to communicate and be intentional about making your marriage great.
All right. Appreciate y'all joining us tonight. From the lady and the coach, we love y'all. Good night.
Good night.